The Banshee of the Badlands. Location: Badlands, South Dakota. Background: the Badlands of South Dakota are a rugged and desolate region, known for their striking geological formations and rich fossil beds. However, beyond the natural beauty lies a darker, more ominous legend, the tale of the Banshee of the Badlands. This ghostly figure is said to wail and scream, foretelling death and misfortune to those who hear her. Witnesses describe a woman with long hair and a skeletal face, an apparition that has haunted the Badlands for generations. The first sighting. In the late 1800s, settlers began to move westward, drawn by the promise of new land and opportunities. Among them was the Thompson family, who settled in a small cabin on the edge of the Badlands. The Thompsons were a hard-working family, determined to carve out a life in the harsh, unforgiving landscape. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and cast long shadows across the rocky terrain, young Mary Thompson wandered away from the cabin to gather firewood. As she ventured deeper into the Badlands, she heard a faint, mournful wail carried on the wind. Curious and slightly unnerved, she followed the sound to a narrow ravine. There, standing on a ledge above her, was a ghostly figure. The woman had long, flowing hair that billowed in the wind, and a skeletal face that seemed to glow in the fading light. Her eyes were hollow, and her mouth was open in a silent scream. Mary froze in terror as the apparition pointed a bony finger at her, and then vanished into the darkness. Mary ran back to the cabin, her heart pounding in her chest. She breathlessly recounted her encounter to her parents, who were skeptical but concerned. Her father, John, decided to investigate the next morning, but found no trace of the ghostly woman. The incident was dismissed as a figment of Mary's imagination, but the memory of that skeletal face would haunt her for the rest of her life. The legend spreads. Word of Mary's encounter with the ghostly woman spread quickly among the settlers and Native American tribes in the region. The Lakota Sioux, who had lived in the Badlands for generations, had their own legends about a wailing spirit. They called her Winyan Nunpa, or Two Faces Woman, and believed she was the spirit of a woman who had died tragically and now wandered the land, foretelling doom. According to Lakota legend, Winyan Nunpa was once a beautiful young woman named Ahote. She fell in love with a warrior from a rival tribe, and their forbidden romance ended in tragedy when her lover was killed in battle. Grief-stricken, Ahote wandered the Badlands, searching for his spirit. She eventually succumbed to her sorrow and died, her spirit forever trapped between worlds. Her wails were said to echo through the canyons, a mournful cry that foretold death. As more settlers moved into the area, the legend of the Banshee of the Badlands grew. Ranchers, miners, and travelers all reported hearing the eerie wails and seeing the ghostly figure. Some claimed that the Banshee appeared before natural disasters, such as sudden storms or landslides, while others believed she foretold personal tragedies, like accidents or illnesses. The Miner's Tale. In the early 1900s, a group of miners set up camp in the Badlands, drawn by rumors of rich mineral deposits. Among them was a seasoned prospector named Henry O'Connor, who was known for his bravery and skepticism of supernatural tales. However, even Henry could not ignore the stories of the Banshee. One night, as the miners gathered around the campfire, Henry recounted his own encounter with the ghostly figure. He had been exploring a remote canyon when he heard a piercing scream that seemed to come from all directions. He turned to see the Banshee standing atop a rocky outcrop, her skeletal face illuminated by the moonlight. She pointed directly at him and then vanished, leaving him shaken and disoriented. The next day, one of Henry's fellow miners, a young man named Tom, was found dead at the bottom of a ravine. His body was twisted and broken, as if he had fallen from a great height. The miners were convinced that the Banshee's scream had foretold Tom's death, and fear spread through the camp. Despite his initial skepticism, Henry could not deny the growing sense of dread. He urged the miners to leave the Badlands, but greed and determination kept them there. Over the next few weeks, more accidents occurred, and the wails of the Banshee were heard almost nightly. The miners finally abandoned their camp, leaving the Badlands and its ghostly inhabitant behind. The modern encounters. The legend of the Banshee of the Badlands continued to endure into the modern era. Tourists, hikers, and park rangers have all reported strange encounters and eerie sounds. One particularly chilling account comes from a family who visited the Badlands National Park in the 1970s. The Jenkins family, consisting of parents Robert and Linda and their 2 children, decided to spend their vacation exploring the natural beauty of the Badlands. They set up camp near a scenic overlook and spent their days hiking and photographing the stunning landscapes. However, their idyllic vacation took a dark turn on their 3rd night in the park. As they sat around their campfire, enjoying the cool evening air, they heard a distant, mournful wail. The sound grew louder and more persistent, sending shivers down their spines. Robert decided to investigate, despite Linda's protests. He grabbed a flashlight and walked towards the source of the sound, his heart pounding in his chest. Robert followed the wail to a narrow canyon, where he saw the ghostly figure of the Banshee standing on a rocky ledge. Her long hair and skeletal face were exactly as described in the legends. She pointed at Robert and let out a blood-curdling scream before disappearing into the night. Terrified, Robert ran back to the campsite and urged his family to leave immediately. They packed up their belongings and drove away, the wails of the Banshee echoing in their ears. The family later learned that a severe storm had struck the area shortly after they left, causing flash floods and landslides. They were convinced that the Banshee's warning had saved their lives. The paranormal investigation. In recent years, the legend of the Banshee of the Badlands has attracted the attention of paranormal investigators. One such team, led by renowned investigator Dr. Samantha Green, set out to uncover the truth behind the ghostly wails. Dr. Green and her team arrived in the Badlands armed with advanced equipment, including thermal cameras, EMF detectors, and digital audio recorders. They set up camp near the site of the Jenkins family's encounter and began their investigation. On the first night, the team heard faint wails in the distance but were unable to capture any definitive evidence. However, on the second night, they experienced a series of inexplicable events. The temperature dropped suddenly and their equipment began to malfunction. The wails grew louder, and the team saw the ghostly figure of the Banshee standing on a rocky ledge. Using a thermal camera, they captured an image of the Banshee, her skeletal face glowing with an otherworldly light. They also recorded an EVP, electronic voice phenomenon, of a woman's mournful cry. Dr. Green concluded that the Banshee was indeed a real entity, her spirit trapped in the Badlands by the tragic events of her past. The investigation received widespread attention, and the legend of the Banshee of the Badlands was solidified as one of America's most enduring ghost stories. A haunting legacy. Today, the Badlands National Park continues to draw visitors from around the world, many of whom come in search of the Banshee. Park rangers regularly hear reports of eerie wails and sightings of the ghostly figure. While some dismiss these accounts as mere folklore, others believe that the Banshee's presence is a reminder of the land's dark history. One park ranger, Ben, has had multiple encounters with the Banshee during his years of service. He first heard her wails while on a routine patrol and has since seen her ghostly figure on several occasions. Ben believes that the Banshee is a guardian of the Badlands, her cries a warning to those who would disrespect the land. Despite the fear and unease she inspires, the Banshee of the Badlands has become an integral part of the park's identity. Her legend is a testament to the power of storytelling and the enduring mystery of the supernatural. As long as the Badlands remain, so too will the wails of the Banshee, echoing through the canyons and reminding all who hear them of the thin veil between the living and the dead. The Banshee's warning. In the summer of 2015, a group of college students embarked on a road trip to explore the natural wonders of South Dakota. Among them were Emily, Jake, Sarah, and Mark, adventurous friends eager to experience the beauty and mystery of the Badlands. The group set up camp near a remote section of the park, far from the usual tourist spots. They spent their days hiking and their nights around the campfire, sharing stories and enjoying the tranquility of the wilderness. On their third night, as they sat under a starlit sky, they heard a distant, mournful wail. Emily, intrigued by the legend of the Banshee, suggested they investigate. Despite some initial hesitation, the group agreed and set off towards the sound, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. The wails grew louder as they approached a narrow canyon, and a sense of unease settled over them. As they reached the canyon, they saw the ghostly figure of the Banshee standing on a rocky ledge. Her long hair and skeletal face were illuminated by the moonlight, and her eyes seemed to burn with an ethereal light. She pointed at the group and let out a blood-curdling scream. Terrified, the friends turned and ran back to their campsite. As they gathered their belongings, a fierce wind began to blow, and the temperature plummeted. They managed to pack up and leave just as a violent storm broke over the Badlands, unleashing torrential rain and powerful winds. The group later learned that the storm had caused severe flooding and landslides in the area, making their campsite uninhabitable. They were convinced that the Banshee's warning had saved their lives, and their encounter became yet another chapter in the enduring legend of the Banshee of the Badlands. The legend of the Banshee of the Badlands continues to captivate and terrify all who hear it. Her ghostly wails and skeletal visage serve as a chilling reminder of the land's haunted past and the tragedies that have unfolded within its rugged terrain. As the Badlands National Park draws visitors from around the world, the stories of the Banshee are shared and retold, each encounter adding to the rich tapestry of folklore that surrounds this mysterious region. Whether as a guardian of the land or a harbinger of doom, the Banshee's presence endures, her mournful cries echoing through the canyons and leaving an indelible mark on all who hear them. The Banshee of the Badlands is a testament to the power of the supernatural and the enduring nature of ghost stories. Her legend will continue to haunt the Badlands, a spectral figure bound to the land by the weight of her sorrow and the echoes of her wails.